Hey there, scientists. Today, we are talking about weathering. And your goal is that you can define weathering and identify agents of weathering. You can also explain how water and wind can break rocks into smaller particles. Have you ever felt wind on a very windy day, and as the wind blows at your face, there's sand on the ground and that sand gets blown up and into your face? Have any of you ever experienced that feeling? Then you get that grit like in your eyes and in your teeth. All of that blowing, winding sand is an experience similar to what happens with weathering. Here in front of us, we have an example of weathering. Weathering by water and wind helped shape this rock into its arched shape. Eventually, more weathering could weaken it until gravity causes it to fall. Do you think that this arched rock always looked like this? Why do you think that, or why not? And what do you think might have caused this arch to form? Now, what some of you said is absolutely ludicrous. There's no way there was a rocket that shot through this rock. But those of you who said, well, as we just looked at in the caption, wind and water helped to shape this rock into an arch shape. That is exactly true. We had wind and water that were able to shape this thing into how it looks now. And that water could have been in the form of rain. It could have been in the form of ice. Water can take many different forms and be able to cause weathering and changes in all of those forms. So we need to recognize that water, ice, wind, and other natural agents can break rocks into smaller particles. Landforms such as mountains, valleys, and plains are shaped and changed over millions of years. These changes to Earth's surface include three processes. The first process is weathering. Weathering happens when rocks break apart, wear away, or dissolve into smaller particles, or when the materials in the rock are changed. The smaller particles are called sediment. Wind, water, ice, chemicals, and even plants can cause weathering. So, what is weathering? Weathering is when rocks break apart, wear away, dissolve, when they have their makeup changed, the way that they are structured, when it's changed, that is called weathering. In science, the word dissolve can mean it's mixed into a different liquid. It could mean that, and add that when a substance dissolves, it doesn't disappear. The particles make up the substance simply become too small to be seen with an unaided eye, which means sometimes weathering happens on such a small level, or the weathering happens when things are dissolving at such a microscopic level that you're going to need to use an instrument in order to be able to see what's happening. So, what things can cause weathering? And yes, we have it highlighted right here in front of us. Wind, water, ice, chemicals, and even plants can cause weathering. Living things can cause weathering. And what is sediment? The sediment is the smaller particles that form as the result of weathering. So when we get that sand blowing into our eyes and getting that grit into our teeth, that is sediment. That is parts of other rocks that have been broken off that are blowing around. Those dust storms, that is sediment. Sedimentary rocks like sandstone and shale make up the rock arch shown here. And they're made up, the sediment is compacted or it's squeezed and cemented together to form the rock. So let's look a little bit closer here at this rock. Let's really observe what we can see here. What do we see? And yes, you are right. Some of you are still very focused on seeing that there is a gap here. It looks like there's more weathering done in this point on this left side. I also noticed that, there's different colors here. The rock looks darker here. There's even like a whole split in a line, like it was almost like cut or shaved or something happened here. You get this darker color and then a light band. The colors have definitely changed. And then up top, it looks like it's more flaky. The layers look much thinner on the top of this than they do on the bottom. So those are all great observations to make, especially when we're trying to observe how weathering happens. You may say that the layers are different colors, that they seem to sequence on both sides, like where it's darker on the right side here, it's also darker with an equal gap on the left, like from top to bottom, the height of the color layers are similar. What do you think all these layers mean? Yes! Well done. That is exactly how we need to think like a scientist. That means we can conclude, we can infer that at some point, this layer, if it's the same on the right side as on the left, it probably was one continuous layer that went all the way across, which means there would have been a time where this gap would not have been here. And I can use my scientific skills of observation to come to that conclusion. Again, weathering by water and wind helps shape this rock into its arched shape. Eventually, more weathering could weaken it until gravity causes it to fall. So we can see that weathering is still continuing to wear away this small left side in the middle here, and we can see that it's possible that this arch continues to change because of weathering. But just like on the top where it's all one layer, it is possible that over time, this middle section weathers away some more, and we can see the continuation of the line from one side to another, but more of the rock may be missing in that middle arched gap. So how could gravity change this arch? If it says here, eventually more weathering could weaken it until gravity causes it to fall, how could gravity change it? Well, yeah, if all of a sudden this side becomes too weak or unstable, gravity might just make this whole thing just fall down, just completely fall over. So what we know here is we know that landforms like mountains, valleys, and plains, they're shaped over millions of years. And the first process in changing everything is weathering. Weathering is happening today, weathering is happening yesterday, and weathering will happen tomorrow. Will we see those changes immediately? No. It takes a long time for some of these changes to become apparent. But if we look closely, we can see how weathering affects the landscape around us. As you move forward, you are going to have to be able to explain what weathering is. You're also going to be expected to explain how weathering might affect rocks. You will be asked to identify the different types of weathering that can be caused. And when this is all done, you should be able to define weathering and identify agents of weathering, and you should be able to explain how water and wind can break rocks into smaller particles. Good luck, scientists.